Hello and welcome to a breaking news episode of the Days of Roar podcast. I'm Evan Petzold, the Detroit Tigers beat writer for the Detroit Free Press, and I'm joined, as always, by Mark Gorash. The Tigers have signed right-hander Jack Flaherty to a 2-year, $35 million contract with an opt-out clause after the first season. There's a lot to unpack here, but Mark, what is your initial reaction to Flaherty returning to the Tigers?
My initial reaction is I think I tweeted something 3 days ago that I didn't think the Tigers would sign anyone. So, Scott, if you're listening, I was wrong. You signed somebody. As far as the impact on the Detroit Tiger baseball team, is it ever a bad thing to sign potentially good players? I mean, it's not, is it? So the question now becomes, now that they paid fair market and limited their exposure in year 2, how's Jack Flaherty going to throw? How's it impact all kinds of things in their rotation? Does it impact Jackson Jobe pitching in Toledo for 2 weeks so they can suppress his service time? Or do they still think that he could be Rookie of the Year and not do that? We're going to get into all these things. The big question is, what do you think?
I think it's a fantastic signing for the Detroit Tigers, and it's a great signing for Scott Harris. I mean, look at what Scott Harris has done in the past 14 months when it comes to Jack Flaherty. Scott Harris went out and signed Jack Flaherty to a 1-year, $14 million contract in December 2023. Then he traded Jack Flaherty to the Los Angeles Dodgers for 2 prospects in July 2024. And then he turned around and signed Jack Flaherty to a 2-year, $35 million contract here in February 2025. The 2 prospects that Scott Harris got back for Jack Flaherty in that Dodgers trade, catcher Thyron Lorenzo and shortstop Trey Sweeney. Trey Sweeney helps the Tigers make it to the 2024 postseason. Obviously, the Tigers fell short in the ALDS to the Cleveland Guardians, but Trey Sweeney was a big reason why they got there. He had some pretty big moments. He had a huge catch against the Baltimore Orioles. If you don't remember, that was the catch with Bo Brisky on the mound, and they stranded 2 runners in scoring position with nobody out. And Trey Sweeney had the epic catch with Riley Green coming in from left field. Trey Sweeney going out towards the outfield. They collide. Trey Sweeney holds on. The runner isn't able to tag up. He gets the ball in, and that really won the game for the Tigers there against the Orioles. And it was a huge part of them getting to the point where they were able to clinch a spot in the postseason and snap a decade-long playoff drought. So Trey Sweeney was a huge piece. And then Thyron Lorenzo, you look at what he did. I mean, he was not the same prospect in Los Angeles that he was in Detroit. When he came over to the Tigers, he absolutely started to rake. He started to smash balls left and right. And the Tigers have done a great job working with him on his receiving behind the plate as a catcher. That's the big piece of his development. We know he's going to hit the ball hard. We know he's going to make some pretty good swing decisions. Yeah, a little bit of swing and miss concern with Lorenzo, but he hits the ball really hard and he makes good swing decisions. That matters a ton. The big question is, can this guy stick behind the plate? And the Tigers have been putting in a ton of work with him on his receiving, on his game calling, just trying to get him locked in to be a catcher and lead a pitching staff into the future. So you have a catcher of the future in Thyron Lorenzo, and you have a potential shortstop of the future, probably more shortstop infield depth in Trey Sweeney. But then you sign Jack Flaherty back and you get him for at least 1 year, maybe 2 years. I think it's a huge hat tip to Scott Harris for making this happen. And obviously, the market was the market for Jack Flaherty. That's what ultimately led to this. Let's not forget that Jack Flaherty, at the very beginning of the offseason, he wanted to re-sign with the Los Angeles Dodgers, where he finished the 2024 season. He wanted to go back to the Dodgers on a 5-year, $100 million contract. Jack Flaherty was not talking about the Tigers. The Tigers were not talking about Jack Flaherty, but now here we are at the end of the offseason, and Flaherty's pretty much begging the Tigers to reunite on a short-term contract, and Scott Harris takes advantage of the situation. I think that was an excellent job of Scott Harris being able to evaluate the situation at the beginning of the offseason, see how the market changed, and then strike, at the right moment. And he did exactly that with Jack Flaherty. As for the contract too, I love the way that it's structured. And my biggest thing with Jack Flaherty was, maybe you don't sign him to a short-term contract, because what happens if it's a 3-year deal with 2 opt-outs and he gets hurt and he has Tommy John surgery, or let's say the back gives out and he has a back issue? Well, then you're stuck eating the final 2 years of a 3-year contract, because the guy's going to continue to opt in, just like, in the Cody Bellinger deal, for example, that we saw in the past. But the way Scott Harris structured this deal, I'm totally impressed, because it is low risk, high reward, and it still includes an opt-out. I did not think there was a world in which the Tigers would be able to come to a deal with Jack Flaherty with an opt-out in there where it made sense for the Tigers. But in this case, it makes so much sense for the Tigers because of the way it's structured. Flaherty will earn $25 million in 2025. That's guaranteed. If he opts in for 2026, he will earn $10 million. But the value will increase to $20 million if he makes at least 15 starts in the 2025 season. If Flaherty dominates, he's going to test the free agent market again next offseason in search of a much bigger contract. If he struggles, he returns to the Tigers for likely $20 million in 2026, assuming he makes at least 15 starts in 2025. If Flaherty suffers a serious injury, such as Tommy John surgery for the first time in his career, or a back injury, don't forget he had those 2 injections in his back last season before the trade deadline. Then he returns to the Tigers for likely $10 million in 2026 because a serious injury would probably hinder him from making 15 starts in 2025. So the best case scenario here, Flaherty performs like an elite level starting pitcher and opts out. The worst case scenario, Flaherty opts in because of poor performance or a serious injury. But the Tigers are only on the hook for 10 or 20 million, which isn't a whole lot of money, relatively speaking. And more importantly, it's only a 1-year commitment at that point in the contract. The way the contract was structured is a massive win for Scott Harris. The way that Scott Harris read the market, great job, bravo, hat tip, because there was no market for Jack Flaherty. So I think when you look at the deal in and of itself, it's a slam dunk home run type signing. Like there's nothing wrong with it. There is nothing bad about this deal with Jack Flaherty because of the way the contract is structured, because of the way Flaherty's market developed or didn't develop in this case, because there just weren't a lot of teams out there that were interested in him specifically on a long-term deal. That forces him to take a short-term deal and the Tigers strike. So I thought it was a great deal all in all. I'm a huge fan of this signing the same way that I was a huge fan of the Tommy Kahnle signing, but Jack Flaherty, man, oh man, let's not forget, this guy pitched like a true ace before the trade deadline. I mean, I know Tarek Skubal is the ace of the Tigers, but if Tarek Skubal did not exist, we would have been calling Jack Flaherty an ace. That's how we would have been describing him based on the way he pitched for the Tigers last season. It was incredible. He had a 3.17 ERA last year, 162 innings in 28 starts, but he was with the Tigers for 18 of those starts. And in those 18 starts for the Tigers, he had a 2.95 ERA with 19 walks and 133 strikeouts across 106 and 2/3 innings. He was absolutely dominant. So now, not only do the Tigers have the best pitcher in baseball in Tarek Skubal, they also have one of the best rotations in the American League. And on top of that, also one of the best 1-2 punches in baseball with Skubal and Flaherty. This is a great deal for the Tigers, and it moves them closer to being the favorites to win the American League Central.
Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And at the end of the day, Jack Flaherty, when he assessed what was out there for him, after thinking he was going to get a 4 or 5 year deal, or heck, even a 3-year, $75 million deal, obviously none of those deals occurred. Nobody offered him those kind of deals. So what you have now is a place where he thrived before. It's a weird version of friends with benefits because everybody's happy with the setup. Do I think it's a long-term relationship? Heck no. If it was a long-term relationship, it would have been structured in a way it was a long-term relationship. You might even see in July the Tigers trade Jack Flaherty again. It's not an impossibility. It's essentially a 1-year deal for $25 million. The better he throws, the more likely it is he'll opt out. It's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for Flaherty. It's a win for the Tigers. It's a win for Chris Fetter. It's a win for the legacy of how they develop pitching. Nobody doesn't benefit from this, including Tiger fans and the entire ball club, because the more good players you have, the better chance you have to win. So the question now becomes, talk to me about your impressions of how you think this impacts the rotation and impacts everything else.
Well, signing Jack Flaherty completes the Tigers starting rotation. You've got left-hander Tarek Skubal, right-hander Jack Flaherty, right-hander Reese Olson, right-hander Alex Cobb, and right-hander Jackson Jobe. Now, the Flaherty signing also put several starting pitchers on the outside looking in. Talking about Kader Montero, Casey Mize, Kenta Maeda, Matt Manning. Those are some of the names that we were talking about as, okay, they'll compete for that 5th spot in the starting rotation. Well, now that 5th spot is no longer up for grabs. That 5th spot has been filled by Jackson Jobe because the 4 spot has been filled by Alex Cobb, because the 3rd spot has been filled by Reese Olson, because now the 2nd spot has been filled by Jack Flaherty. So that's how it kind of works out when it comes to the rotation, what the Tigers had going into opening day. I still think Jackson Jobe is 100% going to be in the opening day starting rotation as long as he shows a pulse in spring training. Again, the Tigers will get a draft pick if he ends up, being a finisher for American League Rookie of the Year. That's a really big deal. If he wins American League Rookie of the Year, Tigers get a draft pick. Jackson Jobe is one of the favorites to win Rookie of the Year. So I don't see why the Tigers would want to manipulate his service time in that sense, when even if they manipulate his service time, he comes up and wins Rookie of the Year. We saw that with Paul Skeens, right? That then the Tigers don't get the pick and the player gets the full year of service time. So in this case, I think you just put him on the roster, you put him in the rotation, you give him the best chance to win Rookie of the Year. You know that if he wins it, he gets all of his service time, as he would anyway, because you're putting him on the opening day roster. And at the same time, you get a draft pick. Those draft picks are valuable to the Tigers. I mean, they really, really care about them. You better believe that. Like, this is an organization that really cares about the draft, cares about building from within. They've been able to find some guys in that range, like a Kevin McGonigal type. If they can find more of those guys by getting a draft pick of Jackson Jobe winning Rookie of the Year, they're going to be all for it. They're going to take their chances there. So I think Jackson Jobe is in the rotation for sure on opening day. And then, like I said, you got Jack Flaherty, Tarek Skubal, Reese Olson, and Alex Cobb as the other 4 starters. It's just, you have other guys who are now on the outside looking in. So does that mean that Keider Montero is in AAA Toledo? Probably. And that's probably where he should be, because he's going to get a chance to develop a little bit more. And he needs that. He needs that final polish before he really becomes a mainstay in the big league rotation. Casey Mize, is he a starter in Toledo or is he a reliever in Detroit? Great question. Matt Manning, is he a starter in Toledo or a reliever in Detroit? It's another great question. Kenta Maeda, reliever in Detroit, or do they cut ties? We'll see how things go in spring training. But the Tigers are now pretty locked in with the rotation. And if there is an injury in spring training, you have some guys like a Montero or a Mize or even a Maeda who could fill in if needed, if there's an injury. If somebody tweaks a hammy or, has shoulder soreness, whatever it might be at the end of spring training, and you need someone to make a few starts for you at the beginning of the season, the Tigers have guys able to do that, Maeda included in that mix. So that's how it impacts the rotation. Things are pretty much set for opening day. Like, barring injuries, the Tigers have their 5-man starting rotation for 2025 opening day.
That's kind of how I see it. As far as Joe goes, I agree with you. He's probably almost a lock. If for some reason his season isn't going well, or it's obvious he's not going to be Rookie of the Year, if they ever wanted to manipulate his service time, they could do it during the year. So I would say the rotation is almost a lock. My biggest question is, does Kenta Maeda leave spring training as a Detroit Tiger? So it doesn't seem like there's a spot for him. And the Tigers are going to have one of the best AAA starting rotations in baseball. So it's a win-win for everybody. Question becomes, and we'll talk about it a lot more tomorrow, does this impact the Alex Bregman possibilities? Yes or no?
In terms of impacting the possibility, I think it only increases the possibility of Alex Bregman. When you look at what the Tigers have done this offseason, Tigers have signed 4 players in free agency this offseason. Jack Flaherty for 2 years, $35 million. Alex Cobb for 1 year, $15 million. Gleyber Torres for 1 year, $15 million. And Tommy Kahnle for 1 year, $7.75 million. So that's nearly $63 million added to the 2025 payroll. So the payroll is now just below $140 million, which is getting closer to middle of the pack among the 30 MLB teams. The question is, will the Tigers add another $30 million by signing Bregman? That would mean adding nearly $100 million to the 2025 payroll this offseason, making it $170 million in 2025, which would be firmly inside the top 15 among the 30 MLB teams. That doesn't sound very Tigers-ish, like at least not under Christopher Ilitch. But if the Tigers want to win the World Series, and if ownership, front office, and management believes the window is open now, while Tarek Skubal remains a Tiger for at least the next 2 seasons, then you have to add another $30 million to the payroll. You have to go get Alex Bregman to win the World Series. I don't think you go out and get Jack Flaherty if you're not going to make a serious effort to go get Alex Bregman. The Tigers have been in the mix for Bregman. They've been interested in him, right? Like that's been a thing all off season long. So I don't think that you structure your entire offseason around a guy like Alex Bregman and then not sign Alex Bregman. Like, if you look at what they've done, like, they passed up on other options. Like, they didn't sign Anthony Santander. They didn't sign Christian Walker. They didn't sign Ha-Sung Kim. And they've needed a right-handed bat to be in the middle of the lineup. And when you consider what they went out and got, they got Gleyber Torres, a right-handed hitter, but they swapped Spencer Torkelson in that situation, another right-handed hitter. So we talk about like there being too many lefties in the lineup last year. Well, there's the same number of lefties still. The Tigers have built their entire offseason around Alex Bregman, an impact, middle of the order bat. And I don't see them not getting Alex Bregman at this point. I think this only increases the chances of them actually getting Bregman. Now, obviously, things remain to be seen, right? The Houston Astros are out there. Chicago Cubs are in the mix. The Boston Red Sox are a team to watch. The Toronto Blue Jays, although I don't really think Bregman's going there, but the Toronto Blue Jays, maybe they'll throw their money at him. I mean, we'll see what happens with the Bregman saga and how it all unfolds. But again, I think the Tigers should feel pretty good about their chances at this point just because of what they've been able to establish with their offseason built around getting a foundational piece like Alex Bregman. If they get Alex Bregman, they have a chance to win the World Series. Like right now, like they've taken like a couple steps forward, but you go sign Alex Bregman, you take a massive leap forward. I don't think you take all the little steps only then just to stand there and hope for the best. Like, I think they've taken enough steps now where it's like, okay, you got to go out and get him and you got to complete the offseason because then you become American League Central favorites for sure. No question about it. And honestly, you have a good chance to go to the World Series. And once you get to the World Series, anything can happen. So that's where I think things are at right now. Tigers are still interested in Alex Bregman. Yes. Will they go get him? Honestly, I think they will. I think the Tigers are going to get Alex Bregman.
Well, all I can say about that is the only thing that's changed is the team is better. So if it encourages Alex Bregman to take the idea of playing in Detroit in his window a lot more seriously, great. I don't think the money's changing. So it'll be up to him. I did, for everybody to know, text Ev the other day and I said, I got a feeling there's somebody in Arizona working out that's probably getting pretty restless. I wonder what happens this week. That was 2 days ago. So let's see what happens with Alex Bregman. All right. We got another pod to do tomorrow. I think we've covered the Jack Flaherty signing pretty well. You can always rate, listen, subscribe wherever Days of War is published, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and at every Evan Petzold article at thefreak.com, of which he's already written two about Jack Flaherty and about to drop another one because he is a prolific beat writer, to say the least. I want to thank our editor, Nicole Avery Nichols. Hats off to the magic man who is going to edit this in the middle of the night. We dropped it for you. Love to my grandsons. Love the Savannah Petzold. Until tomorrow. Peace.